Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. I'm your host, Stephen Peinecker, and I just really am grateful for the guests that we're about to talk to today. I think there's a really important conversation we're going to have. Last week, I was on Reddit and I was scrolling through and I saw this interesting news article pop up talking about this new partnership that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is going to be having with a very important historical church in New York City. And when I saw which church it was, and when I went to their website, I was astonished, and you will be astonished as well. I think the church is turning over a new leaf and really doing something remarkable and historic as well. But before we get started there, I want to thank my co-hostess with the mostest, Rebecca Biblioteca in the house. It's been a while. How you
It
doing?
has been a while, Steve. I am so excited to be back on the program and especially about this topic because I too saw the articles about this partnership with the LDS Church and needing a place to meet. And I thought this was a very interesting scenario. So I'm so glad that you dug in a little bit more and that we get to talk to our amazing guest today. This is going to be fabulous.
Well, one thing we all know that Rebecca Biblioteca does a lot of digging and finds information, of course, with what you do over at your podcast, Mormonish, with you and Landon, the work
Right.
you guys do as well. But you and I have done a lot of this as well,
We
investigating
have.
stories
We
and
have.
getting to the bottom of things, which I think is really important that this space occupies that, but also does it in a way that's neutral, unbiased, and fair. And I want to welcome our guest onto the program. And this is a very important individual. This is the pastor of a very prominent church, and I want to thank Will Critzman for coming on the program today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Steve. Rebecca, it's a joy to be here with you today.
So, Will, I just want you to I want you to talk a little bit about, no, just so you know, folks, this is what happened. So basically, just last week, I believe, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints signed a lease, right, to use your facilities. So you guys are what you call, it's kind of a partnership. You call it roommates with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, using, was it 35,000 square feet of some of the extra space that you have. And that just closed recently. And you just met with a lot of the leadership, local leadership, just this week to kind of finalize things. And so this is a remarkable thing. And what I think what's so amazing is the historic importance of your church, but also the fact that it is an LGBTQ affirming church, a safe space for those, that has pride flags hanging out in the building. And those pride flags will be prominently displayed, will not be taken down. And this will be part of the story of the restoration. Will, I just want you to kind of give a little history of your church, and then I want you to talk about how this all led to happening in the first place, because this is amazing.
Sure, I love it. I'm Will Critzman. The church calls me Reverend, but you should just call me Will. I am the 58th senior minister of the Collegiate Church of the City of New York. The Collegiate Church is the oldest continually worshiping Protestant church in the country. We date back to 1628 when we were still the city of New Amsterdam and we were a little church in a fort. About 4 years after we were founded as a church in 1628, the then senior minister wrote to the King of the Netherlands and said, you know, one of our primary missions right here is educating young people. I need a teacher. Can you send one? In 1632, the Netherlands sent over who would become the first headmaster of the historic Collegiate School for Boys, which is one of the nation's preeminent schools for boys and college preparatory schools here in New York City. For nearly 400 years, the school and the church and everybody else in the city of New York have worked together for a better world, for building the creation that God has longed for us to see. At this moment, Collegiate School and the Collegiate Church have gone separate ways. We still remain really good friends, but that's so that the school can serve an ever-widening and more diverse population. They cohabitated with us until about 7 years ago in our building on 77th Street. West End Church, which I'll show you some pictures. I brought some photos with me. I'm a proud parent of this here congregation and everything that we do, and I just love to show off our people and their good work and their stories. You'll see that West End Church itself was built in 1892 by the consistory of the Collegiate Church to serve the growing Upper West Side community, which was filled with young immigrants with families. And so in 1892, they built this massive campus, which is 3 buildings, a sanctuary building, a chapel building, and a school building, specifically to co-house a new congregation and the school for boys. In 2016, the school started moving towards a bigger and new campus a few blocks south of us, which left us with about 35,000 square feet of unused space. My congregation had lots of ideas. We were building out all sorts of strategies for how to reinvigorate this space and really best serve our neighborhood. Then a pandemic happened, and then church changed, and we don't know what we need, and nobody knows what you need out of space other than we know that we need places that feel sacred, and we know the human soul needs places of beauty and prayer and art. But it still left us with a lot of classrooms and an empty gym and a big building that wasn't being used well. So last summer, we went to market looking for new mission-aligned partners. We looked for schools, we looked for other houses of faith, we were looking for other partners that were embedded in the fabric of New York City that would serve our community and hopefully our world. As it turns out, the ones that have come to the forefront, and our first one to kind of officially move in, is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who has their main Manhattan tabernacle is a few blocks south of us at 65th Street, just across from Lincoln Center. That tabernacle, a beautiful, important building in the city of New York, is about to undergo a comprehensive renovation. So in March of this year, the congregations that live in that building are about to become temporary homeless while their building undergoes renovation. Of course, those of us in the Abrahamic faiths understand the importance of wilderness experience, of building a tabernacle, of taking what is important and going out to the woods, and of welcoming the stranger. So at West End, we're pretty delighted that we get to welcome our friends from just a few blocks south into our building during their wilderness experience, during this tabernacle experience where they are going to rebuild their sanctuary, rededicate it to the glory of God and to the good of the city. But for the moment, for the next 3 years, maybe 4, construction delays happen, we're going to figure out how to be roommates together, and they're coming in to use about 35,000 square feet of our space. The lease officially began on January 1st. We've got a few months of kind of ramp up as we figure out who each other are, what our cultural differences is, how we manage as there are two different churches. I'm learning so much and loving everything that I do. I'm a student of world religions. I'm a student of Protestantism in America. This here relationship is really exciting to me. I think one of the things that we do so well in America these days is we're getting better at interfaith work. We're getting better at Abrahamic faith-based work. A relationship between the Latter-day Saints and a historically mainline Protestant church in America feels new to me. It feels like we're broadening that circle and getting our arms around a broader community of people who are like us, like that are building God's world, that are raising the best generation yet, that are focusing on justice, that have a clear vision for the world that God longs to see. And so we're beginning to get our arms around it, and we're welcoming our new friends in. It's going to be a little bumpy. We're going to figure it out. It's a 130-year-old building. These things aren't easy. We've got all sorts of questions, but beyond that, we've got all sorts of hope. So that's the beginning of how this here new relationship, which technically is a landlord and lessee relationship. We're thinking about it as roommates. We're creating house rules about who does the dishes and what bathrooms are cleaned on what days by whom to make sure that we all live together well, but we're pretty excited.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I just love to see the convergence of this. Honestly, this is what this channel is all about too, is to get people that normally don't talk to each other, talking to each other. I think it's a beautiful story. I just the significance too of this is, you know, my familial roots come from the Dutch Reformed, Christian Reformed Church, which has its roots in one of the churches so basically you have a dual affiliation with two denominations, two important historic denominations in American Christianity. One is the Reformed Church in America, which was founded by the Dutch, and that's the original congregation, and that's their affiliation that comes out of that. And then you also have the United Church of Christ, which has its historic roots that go back all the way to the Pilgrims, the Puritans, and such. This is a merger that happened between 4 major mainline Protestant denominations in the 1950s. So United Church of Christ should not be confused with the Church of Christ or the Restorationist Protestantism. This is a separate stream here. But these are important churches. And to see, in many ways, you know, the story of American Christianity and American Protestantism in particular plays a major role in informing the Restoration and Latter-day Saint history as well. And to see that, you know, of course, Joseph Smith, they came from Pilgrim stock. And this is really important that the story of American Christianity is told in these two unique groups that you represent, but also within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I love the fact that, like you said, they're going to be roommates. You had said you're going to be giving fist pumps to the kids. You said there's 150 kids that will be from Latter-day Saint kids that will be there. And you feel that it's really important that also the role that your church can play can be instructive and informative to the next generation of Latter-day Saints as well. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, thank you so much for that. So, West End Collegiate Church is one of 4 congregations of the Collegiate Church of the City of New York. This is the organization that was founded in 1628. Today, we're joined in ministry by our sister church down at Marble Collegiate Church, which was really important during American 20th century Protestantism. It was the church of Norman Vincent Peale. It was a church of a major and significant congregation here in New York City. We're also joined by our siblings down at Middle Collegiate Church, which in the 21st century is a major force for justice. My colleague, the Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis, and her work in fierce love and combating racism and sexism, homophobia within the church is one of the major prophetic voices in progressive Christianity today. We're also joined with our siblings uptown at Fort Washington Collegiate Church, up in the Inwood and Washington Heights neighborhoods. So the 4 of us together today comprise the Collegiate Church, which over time has changed. We've closed churches, we've opened churches, we've always responded to the needs of the world. And at this moment, we are all in a moment of rebuilding and of creating better sustainability for each of our campuses. Perhaps the most important work that we're doing right now is in December 3 years ago, our church, Middle Church in the East Village, burned to the ground with a catastrophic fire caused by an electrical shortage in the building next door. Our church is rebuilding, working on that, raising money and trying to figure out what is the future of that church and that neighborhood. And all of us, Middle, Marble, West End, Fort Washington, come together as a singular unity. We think of ourselves as one church in 4 locations. Steve, you're absolutely right. The Collegiate Church is the mother church of the RCA. The RCA comes out of us. We were started in 1628. We are organized by Royal Charter of 1696. We predate the US Constitution. We predate the US tax code. We predate pretty much everything, and have long played a very important role and a very loving role with the Reformed Church in America. A few years back, my colleague, the Reverend Dr. Michael Boss, who is now at Marble Church, as well as the full consistory of Collegiate, began moving toward a dual affiliation with the United Church of Christ, specifically over matters of women's equity and LGBT inclusion within the church, ordination of LGBTQ folks and marriage of LGBTQ folks. This decision to dually affiliate it ultimately allowed the church to call me as the 58th senior minister. I'm an ordained UCC pastor. I've served in UCC settings, in Presbyterian settings, and now in this setting, and I'm thrilled. In addition to being the 58th senior minister and the leader of West End Church, I'm also the president of the full Collegiate consortium at this point. So in terms of big news for a very small number of people, I'm the first queer person to occupy both of these offices, and that's exciting for many, many of us that are paying attention to how faith and Christianity is moving forward. In terms of where we are today and how we are welcoming these new Latter-day Saint friends, and particularly this young generation, I speak a lot about the importance that all of us have, whether we have kids or not, whoever we are, how our job is to raise the best generation yet, to raise a generation that is more tolerant, that can speak across the aisles, that has justice as just a fabric of who they are, that takes individual rights as God's immense imagination and diversity, that really sees a way to build things that so many of us older folk have gotten entrenched in our ways and just can't get out of them. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that's coming to us, these congregations, some of the people that I've met that lead their children and youth programming, as I said, I'm told they've got 150 kids in these congregations that are going to be walking through my building. These are big congregations that are going to be worshiping in our space on Sunday and teaching in our spaces on Sundays and in our building throughout the week. They're going to run in with us. Like, we're going to be roommates. We will pass each other in the halls. We'll pass each other in the sanctuary. And just by sheer dint of who we are and who West End Church is and looks like, there's going to be a different visibility that some of these kids are going to have than what they've had so far in the tabernacle. This is one of those examples of St. Augustine's preach the gospel at all times and when necessary use words, in my mind. At this time, we are simply doing God's work of bringing a beloved community together, of providing space, of trying to do some good in the world, and of being real about who we are in order to help each other imagine a better and more diverse world. And so just with those kind of fist bumps, that Steve, I love that image, and that's exactly what I'm thinking about. Like, I don't have any agenda. I don't have any sort of idea about anything with our new roommates other than us all being really real together and getting to know each other. So when these kids who have been raised in the tabernacle, who are New York City kids, who go to public schools, who participate in scout troops, who understand the secular sacred divide, who toy with the fact of like, how do I deal with LGBT inclusion at my public school, but that it's not represented in my faith-based community, simply by dint of being in our building, we're going to connect some dots. And every time some kid fist bumps me with my manicure or walks through our sanctuary doors with those pride flags, they're getting a vision for a world that doesn't have such a sacred and secular divide. They're getting a vision for how you can be both a faith-based person and true to who God created you to be. And somewhere down the line, as the young queer kid inside of me still knows, somewhere down the line, we're going to save a life. There's a life here that is worth saving. And if it's only one, and even if we never know it, and if it's 20 years down the line, that will make this entire partnership worth it to me. That one life that Jesus so loves, that is going to see a different way of being, not valuative, not better, not worse, just different. And they're going to say, oh, I have room at the table. This is why we believe women in leadership are so important, so that young girls have a vision. This is why we believe queer people have a voice at the table, so that young kids can see them. This is why people of color need to be in leadership, because we need to be modeling visibility. And that's what we're doing at West End Church, and it's what we've always done, and we've always done it quietly. We're not a big fanfare. Like, you will look for us. We're not a big social media church. I don't tweet. I have zero social media presence. We simply do the work and link arms together. And then some good folks like Stephen and Rebecca stumble upon us and say, like, come tell your story. And we're super excited to come tell our story. But it comes out of doing the work day in and day out, and of simply being the people that we are.
You know, Rebecca, you know, when I sent you the information about this church to you last week and asked for you to get in touch with Will, you understood the significance and how symbolic this is, and how remarkable to think that typically the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints doesn't lease space. They typically have their own buildings. They do their own thing. But within the Protestant world, within our circles, it's not unusual at all for us, for congregations, to share spaces with each other. This is actually a pretty common practice. Or maybe a new church is just getting started up, and the United Methodist Church opens their doors and say, yeah, you know, you could use the services, the building on Sunday afternoons, that kind of thing. There's always been that cooperative spirit between a lot of the groups. Also, keep in mind, folks, I just want to make it very clear. Will is part of what we would call mainline Protestant Christianity. I'm part of what is called evangelical Christianity. But typically, we still recognize each other's communions and recognize each other's baptisms. We consider each other as fellow believers in Christ. And that we're not as divided as many people would like to make us think that we are. That religiously and theologically, there's a lot of unity amongst our groups as well, just to kind of give some perspective. So Rebecca, maybe I'd like to hear, here you are, you know, you were raised in the church. Do you think you would ever have seen something like this happen?
Oh, absolutely not. When I read the article that the church was leasing space, that alone was extremely unusual. I had not come across that before, because LDS congregations have specific needs in how their Sundays kind of operate. Number one, they need a basketball court. So I'm happy to hear that there's a gym. I can understand now why. I'm being facetious there. But so I was already interested in the fact that they were leasing space and what that meant. And the article had not made it clear that it was a renovation. And that's why they were homeless, as you described. And then as I started to understand from Steve the nature of your incredible congregation, I just got goosebumps, because I know that these congregations have not ever had the opportunity to worship in this kind of a space before and be exposed to the things that you described. In fact, I'd love to show, I know that Will brought some pictures. He described the kinds of events simply by entering the building, the kind of things that the LDS congregation will be exposed to. They have a day that's a blessing of the animals. There's a jazz band. I mean, it's just going to be It's going to be something they have never seen before. And it reminds me of when I was in my last kind of phase of stepping away from Mormonism, I would attend other churches just to see what other people did. And it was just so interesting to see that, there's music, there are screens where lyrics to songs, there's a coffee bar, there's just a whole different vibe and environment. It had an incredible impact on me because I'd been very siloed, raised LDS, very conservatively. My family is extremely conservative LDS. I didn't know these other forms of worship or these other type of, religious individuals even existed. I had no idea. So week in, week out, for these members of the LDS congregation to come and be exposed and be part of what you have there. And as you say, to see women in leadership, to see people of color in leadership, to see the LGBTQ community celebrated. These are things, unfortunately, that we typically do not see in LDS congregations. So this is an absolute incredible opportunity for people to be influenced. And like I said, it gives me goosebumps. It's wonderful.
That's great. I love that. And if it gives you goosebumps, then come check us out. Next time
I feel like I want to.
Come on out. I did bring some pictures. Can I show you some pictures of? Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Let me just screen this, and I'm going to show you so we can all see this. This is West End Church. As you can see, like, we are a very traditional looking church, and oftentimes we describe ourselves as traditional liturgy that your grandmother might recognize. So doxologies, glorias, prayers of confession, we've got them all. Like, we know how to do church the way the church has come to us in the main line, with theology that your children need. So traditional liturgy, progressive theology is one of the ways that we think about ourselves at West End. This is our building, and as you can see, those pride flags on the front doors of the sanctuary, they predate me. They were there long before I was called, and have been a witness of the congregation for many, many years. We all know that you open up the doors to a sanctuary and you find its people. This is our inside. Again, beautiful traditional space filled with history. It's modeled on the meat hall of the Netherlands. So it's got really good Dutch architecture. It's a landmarked building. It's in the middle of a landmarked district that is named for the church. Our people come together for the beauty of the church. But there are people who really come together to do the work of the church. And some of the things that I'm most proud of are what you see on your screen right now are pictures of our Tuesday table feeding program. Every Tuesday, we open our doors for a hot meal, plus takeout, plus leftovers, plus clothing, shoes, live jazz music, as much as we can get into people's lives to make them better. No questions asked. Come as you are. There's coffee and soup. There's a little prayer service at the beginning of it. And then there's just a warm place or a cool place to be with as much food as you can possibly eat, and then take some home as well. As you can see, we serve about 100 to 150 people every week. And some of these photos right here are of our Thanksgiving meal this week, which was a partnership with LDS. Some of our LDS friends came and volunteered. LDS supported us financially with this year because you all know, you can remember, the price of turkeys this year was out of control, and we were determined that everybody gets a turkey. It's Thanksgiving. This is the American way. This is some photos of our chapel, which is one of the spaces that LDS will be sharing with us. Rebecca, you mentioned some other favorite programming, some of my other favorite programs. This is this past Christmas at West End Church. And again, like, some photos of our really beautiful sanctuary and our community choir. Our music director, Henry Lee, started last year an outreach program to the local community where we've got about 65 people just from the Upper West Side that come together every Wednesday night. They're Jews and Christians and atheists and young and old. They're mostly women, but that's okay. That's a community choir in New York City. They come together and make music, and we put together concerts for them. This is our annual Christmas concert this year, which takes place just a couple weeks before Christmas and has full orchestra, the community choir, kids choirs. We welcomed a choir from Harlem this year as well. And it ends with just a big Christmas carol sing-along. Just good, simple church, building community as best we can out in the world. You mentioned the blessing of the pets, and this is maybe what we're most known for. every October, we open our doors, we put down this plastic runner down the middle of the center aisle. Luckily, we have not had an accident in many, many a year, but we are filled with dogs and cats and stuffed animals for the little ones. And everybody is welcome to bring their pup or their cat or their photo. We've had lizards, we've had spiders. I've said no more to spiders, but we have had
Don't blame me.
all God's creatures come and howl and participate, and then everybody gets an individual blessing. And as you can see, it's just this joy-filled day that the neighborhood looks forward to all year. And I will say that as a pastor, it's one of those things, you know, like one of my great loves as a pastor is like, there's nothing I love more than baptism. Like getting in the water with somebody and being like, hey, you are a beloved and named child of God is one of my favorite things to do. And this is kind of like that for the animal kingdom. This is like that reminder that these animals are so many blessings to so many people, and blessing them and their owners, we find it to be incredibly meaningful, and it's just so much fun. I also just want to point out, you mentioned jazz bands. One of the things that we've started this year, which is a continuation really of how our community gathers and often gathers around tables and food. This year, we expanded our understanding of communion to get to communion being more than a wafer or a piece of white bread cut into 9 perfect squares and a little cup of juice into an actual meal around a table, like Jesus and the disciples, the men and women that gathered in that upper room so many, many years ago. And so on the first Sunday of every month, when we celebrate communion in our tradition, we move into the chapel out of the sanctuary. We gather around round tables. We have a full brunch. People bring dishes and cakes. We provide eggs and salmon and bagels. We are the Upper West Side, after all. And we worship together around a new mode of jazz worship. So what you're seeing here is people sitting at tables. You see the elements of communion sitting in the middle of them. And this is an expansion of how we believe the priesthood of all believers and of the sacrament happens not up on a chancel, far away from the people, but in the midst of the people. And so we're about 6 months into this experiment. It's proving really great. And it's also one of those things where it's like, this is open to all. So you can be a member of the church, you can not be a member of the church. You can come because you need to pray, or come just because you need a hot meal. But this happens on the first Sunday of every month. And as you can see, our folks are just having a blast with it. That's a little bit of a snapshot of who we are at West End. I could give you the same amazing PowerPoint for the folks down at Middle and folks at Marble and folks at Fort Washington. Across all of Collegiate, we're doing real innovation work right now to imagine what Christianity needs to look like going forward. One of the things that I know as a student of church history is there's a church historian named Phyllis Tickle who talks about how every 500 years or so the church goes through a bit of a reformation. She talks about it as a rummage sale, where every 500 years the church kind of throws out everything it no longer needs and makes room for new things that are coming in. We can look at this as the fall of Rome. We can look at this as the Great Schism in the 11th century. Of course, the Reformers in the early 16th century. 500 years later, almost to the day right now. Like this is funny Kairos time. This is spirit working in and amongst our midst. Almost 500 years to the day for Martin Luther, we get this COVID pandemic that forces us all to reimagine what the church is. And as we are all coming out of this, thinking about this, moving forward, we're in a moment where I see the church really beginning to let go of many of the trappings of 20th century Protestantism and making room. And this is one of the things that I love about the United Church of Christ. The United Church of Christ kind of thinks about itself as both the oldest and the newest denomination. They are the church of the Congregationalists, so the Massachusetts Bay Colony. They're the church of the Pilgrims and the Puritans. They're the church of some German evangelicals and some reformers that came and settled in the Pennsylvania Valley. They are this church of these historic 4 streams. They're the first church that ordained a woman. They're the first church that ordained an LGBT man. They're the first church that ordained a Black woman. They've long been abolitionists, like they've claimed this justice, but they weren't formed until, as a denomination, as Steve said, until 1956. So the youngest of the mainline denominations with these very old roots. And so the UCC, more than many denominations, I think, and I'll tell you, Steve, I'll join you with that evangelical background. I was raised in the Missouri Synod of the Lutheran Church, so I can sing it all and be there, and I will go to the youth camp and I will love it and I will be right there. And gosh, if only I could ever have seen a woman in leadership or known that I was a full person, I'd probably still be very happily there. But things change, and here we are. And so this moment where the UCC allows us to be reformed and always reforming, to believe that God is still speaking, that God is still creating, this moment of reformation, and even just something like a 3-year partnership, a tenancy, a temporary period. This isn't long term. This isn't LDS and the UCC saying we're going to be partners and we're linking our communions and we're going to understand theology and everything else. Like, no, this is like a long first date is many ways. Like, this is like, let's get to know each other. I think we like each other. We have a lot in common. We're New Yorkers together. Like, we live in the same neighborhood. We live in the same buildings. We're on the same co-op boards. There's more that unites us than separates us. And there's so much love that is present through the Spirit and through how we understand God that, friends, we can do better. So that's my great hope for what this Reformation period is right now.
I love it, where the Restoration meets the Reformation. And I think that's a beautiful image to think about. And really, honestly, it excites me because it really is a convergence of a lot of things in my world and part of my journey as well. So this story really resonates for me. And I want to ask you just to kind of get some nuts and bolts, and I actually want to get back and talk about maybe a little bit about you as well and your journey. But before we do that, I want to talk about what did this all lead up to? Because what I found interesting when we did a Zoom call the other day, you had said that there were other groups that came through that you guys didn't want to have association with. You were very particular and about the kind of people you would share a space with. Maybe talk about that and what ultimately led you guys to land on the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as roommates.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that was so important to our congregation when we went out and said, we're going to look for some new partners, new tenants for 35 to 40,000 square feet of the building. West End churches never had to share their building with anybody who wasn't them. I mean, we've shared it with high school kids, but that's easy compared to what it is that we're doing now. And anybody who's lived with high school kids knows that it's not easy. They're noisy and smelly, but they're fun. And they're ultimately pretty compliant when it comes down to it. So it all worked out well. But this moment was a moment where we spent many months in discernment and in strategy about what we would accept or not accept in a partner, what our core values were, what were unimpeachable. And I will tell you in many moments, like, I'm a queer pastor. I do not think the church identifies itself as a queer or a gay church any more than they should identify themselves as a women's church or a men's church or a white church or a black church. Like, we shouldn't be using those labels about church. But I was aware that personally, I may have been ahead of where my congregation or my people were. And that's probably my own sense of just concern or self-doubt, or like, I don't want to get in the way and I really want to do a good job and I want my people to feel like this is theirs. The West End congregation is so amazing. I can't tell you the sense of equity and justice that is so baked into them. This is the Upper West Side. Like, these are folks that marched with Dr. Martin Luther King, who lived through the first generation of women in leadership, who lived through the second generation and are tired of having to still talk about it. These are longtime people who have lived their lives with a sense of this has to get better. And they continued that now. So as we went to market and as we started like getting our sense around like who we are, and people started coming in and our brokers getting to know us and who they're showing the building to, like there were some schools that came in, there were some organizations that came in where the broker said, I don't know if you're gonna, what do you think? And we definitely spent some time in the first rounds while we were all still getting to know each other, looking at a lot of value statements of organizations that were interested in touring. And if we found in those value statements with my committee, and I had this amazing strategic real estate partnership task force led by one of our elders, a woman named Margaret Tobin, and joined by many other members of our consistory, this task force evaluated value statements of faith in this beautiful way of the church being the church, of safeguarding the people on the margins. So this committee that worked for our church really understood that we had to protect the most vulnerable. And the most vulnerable in our minds, in addition to Scripture's commandment that they are children and widows, we see them as children and single people and people of color and LGBTQ folk and people who are historically marginalized. So if we saw in an example that women weren't invited into the top levels of leadership in a way that made sense to us, or if they were explicitly excluded, we thought twice about that. If LGBTQ folk were not acknowledged, if LGBTQ marriage was not acknowledged, an immediate hard no. When the LDS folks came to us, we were like, what is going on? I think we were probably as confused as you two were when you read the article last week, but probably more so because we haven't historically been scholars or certainly experiential learners of the LDS movement. What we came to learn, and I will tell you, like, together, like, we kicked tires, we sniffed, like, we were like, let's just see what happens. And our friends who came on the local level, and it's been an interesting process because we've certainly gotten to know and befriend the local leaders of the congregations here in New York. And we've also gotten to know and kind of befriend and negotiate with some of the leaders in Salt Lake City. So negotiating with the lawyers and bankers and executives in Salt Lake who are flying in to meet us and all these things, and then negotiating, like, who's paying the cable bill and how's the electricity going to get turned on and what's the alarm code with the local congregations, has been an interesting lesson for me in terms of how church structure works. And I think there's a lot that is really beautiful and empowering about how LDS does church that I'm really excited to learn about. For us, we did dig in. We dug into LDS statements of faith. We dug into the LDS evolution on LGBTQ marriage. We dug into when they position changed around the Supreme Court decision in 2016. We dug into all of this and thought, okay, curious, let's keep going. And we did. And as we sat around tables, as the way you often do, as we can do, we started seeing that we had so much in common. And between the congregations, I keep joking about this, but one of the things that is the great unifier of LDS and West End Church at this moment are scout troops. Scout troops. We have 2 scout troops at West End that we sponsor. One is a co-ed scout troop. It has about 75 young people in it. We have female Eagle Scouts coming up through that. We have male. We have a spectrum of gender identifying kids in this scout troop, and they're doing incredible work, and they meet every Tuesday night with us. And then on Thursday nights, we have a Girl Scout troop. And this Girl Scout troop is learning how to be amazing leaders, doing all the wonderful things that Girl Scouts have always, always done. And together, these 2 troops, Girl Scouts and Scouts, they of course have kids in them from both congregations. Like, of course they do, right? We're all Upper West Siders. We all believe in community and civic engagement. So the Scout troops are where the gossip of this potential merger first started emerging. Like, when it started leaking, and I was like, how is this getting out to the world? We've all got, like, major non-disclosure agreements around this. We're not talking about this in the negotiations. How do people know this? It's the Scouts. It's always the Scouts. The Scout troops are talking in the way that kids talk, in the way that parents talk in the hall. And this was one of the ways that the scales began falling through our eyes. We're like, okay, so the kids don't care. The kids are like, that's my friend Jim. Like, he lives up the street. That's Sally. She lives in the building with me. Like, this is so and so and so and so. Like, who cares? They go to a church. I go to a church. Aren't they the same? Like, these are the beautiful ways that young people look at the world. Young people's parents often look at the world the way their children do. And how beautiful is that? So we're seeing this kind of trickle up event where that greatest generation that we're trying to raise is also teaching us a huge amount about how to see differently. And so we don't agree on all matters. LDS and the United Church of Christ are not going to agree on all matters. And it's not my job to proselytize or convert or convince or any of that. That's none of my business. My business is simply to say, this is who I am. I'm a Lutheran, so I can say, like, here I am, so help me God. And I can say, come and talk to me. And they can say, come and talk to me. And ultimately, we can sit at a table and have some water or some juice together. We can sit and talk in ways that we couldn't have talked before. It's the ways, like, think back to your first college roommate, that first person that some computer system matched you with, that you were like, I have nothing in common with this person at all, but you're supposed to live, sleep, and eat together with this person for like a full year. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. That's kind of what we're doing right now. We're going to learn how to live, eat, walk, work, link arms, learn, worship, all of these things we're going to learn together I don't know how it's going to go, but I do know the Spirit is in the mix of it. And I know enough to trust that where the Spirit is, there can be love and there can be tolerance and there can be peace. So I don't know how this is all going to go. And I don't know why this is all happening the way it's happening, but I trust that it's happening for a reason. And I trust that it's happening for a time and for our time.
Wonderful. Wow. Just to I want to kind of get an understanding too that, because it's a two-way street. I think both are going to learn from each other, which I think is really important. You have open minds and you have these conversations, and it's just inevitably that there's going to be a lot of exchanging of ideas. And I wish I could be there, to be honest with you, to experience it as well. But I'm just wondering from your side, some people that have been involved in these talks and also engaging leadership within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on the local level, is also the Salt Lake level. How has that been? What kind of feedback have you been getting from your congregants about this?
So our congregation is really just getting their arms around this right now. We've had this task force, this great. Obviously, our board's been involved, but in terms of the full congregation, they haven't seen everything yet because LDS has not fully arrived. Like their programming is really going to begin in earnest in our building the week of March 4th. They have until the 3rd of March in the tabernacle before construction begins. So we're on an on-ramp right now to get them moved in, iron out the kinks, figure out security. All the details here is kind of the next 6 weeks. So we're getting an ever-expanding model. One of the things that I'm learning and I'm fascinated by is we can think of LDS as a very kind of hierarchical organizational structure. We can think of a lot of churches hierarchical structure, and I get that. What I'm seeing on the ground is this wonderfully flat organization that is volunteer led by people with hearts and minds that are willing to be writing emails at 10 o'clock at night, writing other emails at 6:30 in the morning, that are working around the clock, in addition to working their day jobs, in addition to raising their kids, being on PTA boards, coming to scout meetings, all these other things. They're running the church. And this was in mainline Protestant where we employ church staffs. This is one of those things where it's like, oh, look at this. So getting my staff, like getting my operations director, getting my program director to think about like, hey, your counterparts are volunteers. My counterpart is a volunteer. That's a different way of welcoming people in. So this past Tuesday night, we had 9 local leaders from the 2 LDS congregations that are coming from the tabernacle, as well as a leader from the young singles congregation that is here in Manhattan, all sitting around in the back of the sanctuary, just basically with this meeting purpose of who are we, what do you do, how does this work, and it's an act of translation. And for me, translation is always the key word for interfaith or any faith-based dialogue, that I view one of my jobs as translator. Like, oh, you call it this, we call it this, we can mean this together. So one of the things that I'm learning is really the power, and we know the evangelicals do this really well. We know that the Mormons do this well. This wonderful empowering of the laity that in many mainline Protestant churches has long been outsourced to professional staff. But that I think part of this revolution, this reformation that is happening right now, is going to get back into, we need to be doing more ourselves. So we need to be taking the mantle of discipleship onto each of our shoulders and all doing the work of the church day in and day out. I think LDS is going to show us some ways of doing that, and I'm signed up and ready to be that student. I think on the other hand, at this meeting there were 9 wonderful volunteers and 1 staff member from LDS and my team of 4, and I was looking at them and was like, look, I've got some resources. This is what we do 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week. We're here. Let us help. So hopefully we can all learn to give and share and then accept help in some ways that historically we haven't had to do. So new opportunities abound.
Wonderful. Rebecca, you've been chime in here because isn't it remarkable? Is this a remarkable thing? I think it's just wonderful.
No, it's incredible. And I am thrilled for the learning opportunity I believe that the LDS congregations will have, because the values that you espouse, I think these are going to be incredible for the LDS church to see. The idea of opening your doors to people to serve food. Here in Utah, a lot of other denominations do open their doors as warming centers. The LDS Church has opted out of that. They do not do that. They do donate supplies to the other churches, but as far as actually opening their doors, they have not arrived at that yet. So a learning opportunity there. The idea of showing the LDS congregation women in leadership. LDS people do have women that do serve in some leadership, but there's nowhere in the LDS Church that a woman could make a decision that would not have to be checked by a man. So for them to be able to see this in your congregation is going to be incredible learning opportunity. And just the diversity and the inclusion that you're going to be able to show in LDS congregations and in the faith, a same-sex marriage would be grounds for excommunication. Even just a few years ago, I know they're moving away from that. So to be able to see your beautiful congregation and your wonderful people is going to be an incredible opportunity just to experience something different for them. So I'm really excited. I'm especially excited for children and young people to see this example. In our LDS faith, we have a document called the Proclamation of the Family, that definitely holds up a certain point of view of one man, one woman, very rigid gender roles. For these congregations to be able to see something different and something with such love in it, I am, as I said, thrilled for them to be exposed to this. And I think it bodes very well for the future. So I'm excited.
I hope everybody's as thrilled as you are, Rebecca. I'm really
Oh,
excited.
I'm thrilled.
No, it's fascinating. And you do look at the the evolution here. Of course, we had the Proposition 8 that the church sponsored, was the main financer of the campaign. Remember, I had Dr. Randy Bell on my program, who was one of the organizers locally for Proposition 8. He has since said he's sorry that he was involved in that. We've also seen an evolution of course, we had the November policy, which excluded children of same-sex parents to be able to be baptized into the church
No
at the
saving
typical age
ordinances.
at age of 8, but they had to wait until they were 18, just like the polygamists. And not only that, but they would then have to renounce their parents' marriage in order to be baptized into the church. Now, that since has been rescinded as well. And of course, we are seeing this evolution with the church and this having this evolution when it comes to LGBTQ rights. We just recently, of course, Rebecca, you've been covering this story about the church spokesperson being an active supporter of LGBTQ rights. Maybe just talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, I saw these two stories together almost now that I understand the nature of your congregation, which again gives me great hope for the future, because the church spokesman who has now been chosen to give media statements and interact with the media is a wonderful gentleman who is an ally. There were some pictures that surfaced at a pride parade. He's definitely this wonderful ally. And of course, as we described before, there are more fundamental Orthodox members of the LDS Church, and then there are more progressive. And so on the progressive side, people were like, this is incredible. On the more Orthodox side, people were a little confused because in past years, there has been another narrative. I would bring up perhaps the musket talk, right? Where leaders are saying we need to have a little more, we can't get on board with this. We have to be careful. So to see them choose a church spokesman who is an ally, and then to see them share space with this incredible congregation where they're going to walk past pride flags every day, this is a step. This means something. And it's just amazing, I think.
Thank you.
So one of the things that, and I want to talk a little bit about yourself, but I wanted to, the other day, you were actually meeting with some of the local leadership, and some of your people were in that meeting. And one of your associates went to you and said, these are really good people. And I have to say, and people ask me, because I'm in the evangelical world. I live in Florida. I'm as far away from the Mormon corridor as you can get. And so most people don't even know Latter-day Saints. They don't know anything about it. And people say, what's it like? And I say, you know what? It's the most wonderful thing about doing what I'm doing is I get to hang out with some of the nicest people in the world. And these are, Latter-day Saints. Some are maybe post-Mormon. Some are, all various people, maybe scholars. they're really nice people. Will, has that been your experience as well?
Absolutely. From the very beginning, every single person we've met has been just a wonderful, heartwarming soul around a table. And oftentimes, our leadership right now, my board chair is an amazing woman named Marilyn Flood. Her predecessor was another amazing woman named Catherine Tarapko. The leader of my real estate task force is this amazing woman named Margaret Tobin. Oftentimes, it would be 3 or 4 women from West End Church, plus me, plus 6 Mormon white guys in suits. And so it was like we were like, okay, what's going on? What are we smelling out here? And every time we left saying, wow, this is so amazing. Like, look what we can learn when we just sit at a table together and talk to each other as humans. This is a model I wish we had for our entire country right now. I wish that we could have more of these spaces where we get to learn about our humanity, the sort of space that you provide on this show, Steve, where you invite kind of the people from both sides to come and talk and learn with one another. That's a real model that we all need right now. For West End and for how we are encountering, we believe that nice counts, that being nice matters, that, yeah, there's time for like furor and rage and anger and righteousness and all of those things. Like when an injustice occurs, it is right to be pissed off. Like, it is all these things. And day in and day out, like, how do we love the hell out of this world every day by what it is that we're doing? And every time we expand the circle, every time we meet a new LDS leader, we're just kind of blown away. I've got a couple of them now. They all have my cell phone number. They're starting to text me like, we're going to be buds because we're going to be living together, and we've got more important things to do than bicker. We have 150 kids on their side. We've got all of our kids on our side. We've got young people. We've got a community in need. We have a city, New York City, that is in an economic and immigrant crisis right now. Our level of housinglessness, our levels of inflation, the cost of food, the cost of rent, the mental health crisis that is affecting us all right now. These are such major things that we should be tackling, not do we agree over every letter of the doctrine of whatever that probably nobody believes all of. Like, that there's so little to written faith that everyone can believe. And this is one of the core things that I try to do as a pastor, is to expand the narrative, expand the stories of our faith, expand the creeds and the doctrines and all the things that we say, to find the little pauses that are there that God breathes into, not the periods that humans put there, to find the spaces where other people can get into the story. And I think we're living in an in-between space right now with LDS and with West End. We're living in a pause. This is not their permanent future. They're coming out of the building for a 3-year hiatus to rebuild. What wonders this liminal space can be, this kind of pushing off from one shore and thinking that you're going to that shore, but not knowing quite exactly what will happen. There's so much possibility, so much pregnancy in this pause for how we will say goodbye, or how we will say so long, when we know that the building will be complete and our LDS folks will go home and will be rejoicing and glad. And hopefully we'll be rejoicing and glad with them and celebrating right with them and helping carry all of their important tabernacle items that they're bringing over back to their space with them. We hope that this is a lasting friendship in a temporary space.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about is what I call interfaith in action. And I do have this new little channel called Utah Interfaith Forum, which was birthed out of my Facebook group, the Utah Interfaith Forum. And this is really the key thing, is having these interfaith conversations. This is a space that's open to all faiths, including atheists, as well as, any religion, and where we have these conversations within the context of Latter-day Saint and Protestant and evangelical conversations, Catholic, you name it, Hindus, Buddhists, all are welcome. Muslims, many Muslims participate in the group. And I think it's a really important work that I think that we're doing. And I feel that what you are doing is, I call it a couple of things. I call it interfaithing and interfaith in action. And I believe that that's a sacred thing that you're doing, and sharing sacred spaces with each other. What a beautiful thing to ponder that. And I said, I mean, that's really something to ponderize, if you will, to see that beautiful thing happening. I think is awesome. And I just wanted you just to, because of course, folks, many of you know my story. I've been on Mormon Stories, and I talk about how Mormonism saved an evangelical's life. I love the Restoration. I love the people of the Restoration. I think you're a wonderful, you like to call yourselves a peculiar people. You are, and you're a lovely people. You're an awesome people, and I do appreciate you. So everything that I do on this channel, whether you agree or disagree with the guests that I have on, whether you're on the right or the left, because I get it from both sides now. Just remember, I'm doing this out of love. I really love the people of the Restoration, and I love the Restoration. Okay, this is really important to me. This hits home for me to see what you're doing. And Will, I wanted you just to talk briefly, because I think this is a part of your story. I tell people, regarding my sexuality, I tell people I'm actually quite grateful that I'm a gay man. It was not easy being in a right-wing evangelical world and realizing at a very young age that I was attracted to other boys. And I don't typically talk about my sexuality that much on my program. But I feel like it, that's another touchstone here for me that we share in common with each other. As a queer individual, growing up in a very conservative church, maybe just talk about how that maybe informed your faith, helped you in your faith journey, and ultimately what led to being able to be a person who's able to minister to people and ultimately, probably growing up, you didn't think there would be a space for you as a minister in the church that you're in, that you were born in, and now you got there. So maybe just talk a little bit about that journey.
Oh, Steve, my heart's with you here, brother. I grew up, I loved church as a kid. It was so fun. And it was a place where families gathered, and I had friends, and it was big and it was joyful. And I went to youth encounter meetings, and I was president of the youth group when I was in high school. And I too knew that I was gay very early on. It came out when I was 14. And when I started coming out, the same pastors who had been saying, "We see in you a call to ministry," suddenly said, "There's a camp where you can go," or there's some praying that we should be doing together to be changing this. My family unfortunately split over this issue, and some of my family were welcoming and said, "Yeah, we've always got this. This has not been a secret from anybody forever. So welcome to the conversation, Will." And others of my family, unfortunately, have said, like, "Yeah, this is no secret either, but you should not be living this quote unquote lifestyle," in their language. It was so painful, and I left the church when I went to college. I spent years in Quaker meeting, just quietly sitting and listening to no doctrine, but listening to spirit. I then practiced in Judaism for about 5 years, in a conservative Judaism in San Francisco, studying with a really great rabbi named Alan Liu, reading Jewish writings, discovering Jewish practice. And after the years spent in orthodoxy of kind of conservative evangelical Lutheranism, of orthodoxy being right thinking, the beauty of Judaism, which is about orthopraxis, which is about right doing, was a really wonderful way that my soul healed. During all that time and throughout my 20s and early 30s, my profession was a theater producer. I was a theater producer and fundraiser for the arts in London and San Francisco and New York. And I had a great time, and I never thought about going into ministry. I was happy and thrilled. I ran a literary agency. I did all sorts of things. And in about 2008, 2009, 2010, like after Lehman Brothers collapsed, when the economy was changing, when I was in a moment of my career of wanting more, I began this conversation with myself and with a pastor. At this point, I was worshiping in a Presbyterian church here in New York City. I started talking to that pastor and saying, like, "I don't know, there's something more here, what's going on?" And her response was oftentimes what pastors say when somebody comes and says, is like, "Yeah, get with the program. Like, you're supposed to go to seminary, like get with the program." I said, "Oh, no. And ultimately kind of acceded to that. There's a song, there's a Shaker hymn called "Simple Gift," which many of us know, I know. And that tune is one that haunts me throughout my entire journey, throughout all of my discernment. It's one that I come back to again and again. As a kid, I trained as a cellist. I trained with kind of that register of how Simple Gifts is played in Appalachian Spring by Aaron Copland. Like, that melody that haunts me. It's those words that haunt me. And it's those words that are so Shaker, that are so Quaker in their elements of it's a place where we come down to where we ought to be, not where we should be, which is about us, or where we can be, which is about ego, or where we need to be, which is about other people. It's where we ought to be. And that ought word is a God word. Ought is what God creates in us. This is who you ought to be, my child. This is who you are and who I love. It took so long for me to hear that tune myself, because there were so many other voices and so much other noise that blocked it out for me, and that didn't want me to hear it, because it didn't want me to say to the world, I am beautiful and loving and loved just as who I am. And you know what? My sexuality is my joy. Like, the being, I wouldn't have it any other way. I went through those same periods in high school that for every young gay kid here who's saying, like, just make me any other way, like, let me be anything other than gay. Why is this my cross to bear? Whatever your pastor is telling you, my child, this is not the way. This is who you are. This is your gift to the world. And gay people, queer folk, however you want to identify it, use the language that is right for you, but start speaking it, because it is an imagination of the divine that expands all creation, that is far beyond. When I finally heard the call, and when I went to seminary, and I went to seminary very much to do a project in theology and the arts, I studied with a great mentor named Janet Walton, and really looked at ritual, of these two ways of making meaning. My task when I went to seminary was very much to say, arts organizations, which I was a big part of, are organizations of faith. They are places where people come together to create something that didn't exist before. That's a faith-based process. I wanted to think about running arts organizations as a pastor, as somebody who pulled that out. Swearing I would never go work in a church, which is not a good thing to do when you go to seminary, and not a good thing to say to the Holy Spirit. And so sure enough, in my second year, I started working in churches and haven't left ever since. The arts are still really, really important to me. My husband runs a major theater here in New York City, and we are very much embedded in the artistic and theater fabric here in New York. And as a matter of fact, when we got married, I'm looking at it right over here, we have it framed. When we got married in 2019, the New York Times did a piece on the two of us. And it was one of those things where we're both pretty private people, but we both have pretty public offices. And Patrick said to me when I said, I want the Times to cover this. I want us to let them know. And he said, do we need to? I said, yes, because you are the executive director and producer of one of the most important theater companies in the country. I am the 58th senior minister and first queer president of the Collegiate Church of the City of New York. Somewhere in this country, there is a kid whose drama teacher is saying, you can be whatever you want, and you're going to be amazing, and you're beautiful, and whose pastor is saying, you can be anything you want except that. I want to show that this marriage is possible, that this is possible. We've done that, and that's how we live our lives. And today, I continue to learn. I continue to learn about my sexuality and my gender, and I learn about this from kids that are younger than us, from my patients. In addition to being a pastor, I'm also a psychoanalyst. I'm a certified psychoanalyst. So mental health is very important to me, and I work primarily with younger queer, LGBT, and artistic communities in my psychoanalytic practice. So the language that I've learned from this generation below us about how they talk about themselves, about the options, like these just weren't even options that were possible when I was growing up to express ourselves. Like we were able to say, like, I'm gay, I'm attracted to other boys or men or whatever. But now we have this intersectionality of how we can think about gender and sexuality that goes to the queer, that also then connects us to all people, to the quote unquote straight. Like nobody's straight, nobody's gay, like there's spectrums, like there's such diversity here. And if we could just hold that with a little bit more humor or levity or joy, do you know how much divine love we could all find for ourselves and for each other if we just started accepting that God created us to be so much more than whatever limits we've decided to put on ourselves? If we could all just get back to the garden in a really beautiful way, which means take off your clothes, take off all the drag and all the numbers and all the degrees and everything else that you thought was going to make you who you are, and just stand there and look in the mirror and see who God created you to be.
That's beautiful. Wow, wonderful. And I also, just before we wrap this up, you're going to be actually speaking at one of the local wards soon as well. Is that correct?
I am. I have been invited by Bishop Mark Green to come and speak to one of the wards at the Tabernacle in February, and I'm very excited to go and experience this. This will be my first time in the Tabernacle for a worship time. I'm very, very excited and also deeply honored that they would trust me with speaking with them and meeting their people where they are.
Well, that's great. Rebecca, I'm sure you have any final words you want to say or any questions, Rebecca?
Oh, I just think I do not envy the task of the LDS Sunday school teachers or primary teachers, because when those young people see what's going on the other side of the aisle, the jazz bands, the blessing of the pets, the love, the inclusion, no worthiness interviews, just the incredible inclusion and just the outpouring on the other side of the aisle, I think the Sunday school teacher and primary teachers are going to have a hard time keeping those kids in those seats, because they're going to want to find out what's going on with you guys. And it's going to be an incredible example, I think, that is going to stay with them for the rest of their lives. And that's going to be amazing.
Wow. Wow, this is beautiful. I'm so glad both of you were able to come on. It's always a pleasure co-hosting with you, Rebecca. I want to wish you Godspeed on all your endeavors with Landon. I really appreciate the work that you're doing, and I appreciate your friendship. And I appreciate that I just made a new friend, Will Critzman. Come visit this church. Check it out. It sounds like you're doing a wonderful work. I really do appreciate the perspective you come from. And I also think that I say that I think you're very prophetic. You know, this is a prophetic thing that you're doing. I think that you see something beyond. You see forward. You see around the corner that a lot of people can't see. I think you see the trajectory of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I think that that's part of the reason why you wanted to partner up and be roommates. My friend Will, well, thank you so much for coming on the program today.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Rebecca. It's been a real joy talking with you.
All right, folks. Well, what do you think? Now, of course, I have a very diverse audience. Just last night, I posted my interview with Rod Meldrum, and he's very conservative, as you know. And but I also have a lot of LGBTQ people come on the program, progressives, from people from different perspectives, atheists, you name them. They've all been on my program. And I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on this. I think it's revolutionary what's going on here, and history is being made in the Restoration as well as in the Reformation as well, which I think is awesome. And those worlds are converging for me. So, folks, tell me what you think. By the way, in the description, there are links there that if you'd like to financially support the channel, you can. And by the way, we do have our merch store, MormonBookReviews.com. We have hot chocolate mugs right there, prominently displayed. There we go, and hats and other items. You can check out our website, MormonBookReviews.com, if you're interested in purchasing any merch. And I do want to thank those of you who do financially support the channel. Could not do it without you. And just remember, the most important thing is this. Remember, all the voices of the Restoration will be heard here on Mormon Book Reviews.